Picture the North Atlantic in the early medieval age. It is the heart of winter, a season where the sun is a mere ghost on the horizon. The sky is low, bruised, and heavy with the weight of an oncoming gale. Below, the sea is violently alive. This is not the blue water of the Mediterranean. This is the Whale Road, a grey, churning chaos where waves rise like moving cliffs. They crash down on a narrow wooden vessel, a ship that, by any modern standard, is a suicide craft. It has no deck to shed water, no walls to break the wind, and absolutely no protection from the elements. Ice, thick and translucent, creeps across the hempen ropes and the handles of the oars. Salt water spray freezes mid-air, landing as sharp crystals on the wool tunics and the braided beards of the crew. Every breath is a struggle. The air is so cold it feels like inhaling powdered glass. These men are not out for a few hours. They are in the middle of a transit that could last weeks. And in this environment, where heat is life itself, they lack the one thing every human civilization has relied upon since the Stone Age. No fire. No heat. No shelter. How did Viking sailors survive the deadliest ocean on Earth without ever lighting a flame? The answer is found in the archaeological record. It is a story of calculated, cold-blooded engineering. Vikings were not reckless, they were precise. Their first rule of maritime survival was a paradox: to stay alive, you must embrace the cold. Fire, the bringer of life on land, was the bringer of certain death at sea. When we look at the great ship finds, the Osberg, the Gokstad, and the Skulderlev ships, we see a haunting absence. Researchers have found tools, spare oars, and water barrels, but they never find the ash. There is not a single trace of a permanent hearth found aboard any Viking Age vessel. This was not a coincidence. It was a conscious choice. To understand why, you have to understand the ship. A Viking longship was a floating tinderbox. The hull was saturated in flammable pine pitch and tar. The rigging was treated with animal fats. Even the massive wool sail was impregnated with grease to shed water. In the turbulent space of an open boat, a single stray coal would have been a death sentence. Within minutes, the ship would ignite. In the North Atlantic, there are no lifeboats. The Vikings did the math. The risk of fire was 100% fatal, while the risk of cold was a challenge to be managed. Since they couldn't heat the air, they turned their attention to the human metabolism. They utilized lopi wool, a double-layered fleece from northern sheep. The inner layer was soft and insulating, while the outer layer was naturally waterproof. This specific wool contains high levels of lanolin, a natural wax that repels the freezing Atlantic spray, keeping the skin dry even when the outer garment is drenched. One of the most fascinating technological hacks was the practice of hermetic sealing. Every morning, sailors would use bone needles to sew their sleeves shut at the wrists and their tunics to their trousers. This created an airtight seal, trapping the body heat generated by the exertion of rowing. The sailor essentially became a living radiator. This was not merely about comfort. It was about preventing the chimney effect where warm air escapes from the neck and limbs, leading to a rapid drop in core temperature. At night, when the danger of cold was greatest, the Vikings used the skin bag system. The crews slept in pairs inside massive, double-layered sleeping bags made of reindeer hide. Reindeer hair is hollow, providing some of the best natural insulation on the planet. By sharing a bag, two sailors created a thermal battery. Even when one man left for his watch, the bag remained warm until his partner returned. Fuel for these men came from food, not fire. Because they couldn't cook, their diet was a masterpiece of high-calorie preservation. They relied on dried fish and sour butter, heavy, fermented fats that provided the long-burning energy needed for internal thermogenesis. They consumed enormous quantities of SKYR, a protein-rich fermented dairy product, and hakal, which provided the dense calories required to keep blood circulating in sub-zero temperatures. Every bite was a calculated injection of energy. Beyond the food, their psychological resilience was reinforced by a culture that viewed hardship as a merit. The sagas are filled with tales of men who mocked the cold, not out of madness, but because they knew their systems were superior. They understood that the mind controls the body's perception of temperature. By maintaining high morale through storytelling and gaming, they prevented the onset of psychological shock that often accompanies extreme exposure. This rejection of fire was a strategic masterstroke. Without heavy hearths or stores of firewood, their ships were lighter and faster. They possessed a maneuverability that no other navy of the era could match. They could beach their ships in seconds, leap into the freezing surf, and vanish back into the mist before an enemy could even light a signal fire. They were the masters of the North because they accepted the world as it was, rather than trying to force the world to be comfortable. This logistics-first approach allowed them to maintain longer supply lines and reach destinations others deemed unreachable. They reached North America 5 centuries before Columbus and traded from the Arctic wastes of Greenland to the sun-drenched markets of Constantinople. They did it all by understanding one simple truth: intelligence is the best insulation. The legacy of this cold sailing tradition is etched into the very design of northern maritime culture. It taught them how to read the ice, how to predict the gale by the color of the swell, and how to trust in the collective warmth of the crew. They treated their ships not as homes, but as precision instruments of transit. Every rivet, every stitch in the sail, and every calorie consumed was part of a grander machine designed to defy the laws of the frozen ocean. The next time you feel a winter wind cut through your coat, remember the men on the whale road. They didn't have a flame. They didn't have a heater. They only had each other, their wool, and a plan that transformed the most hostile environment on Earth into a highway of empire. They didn't just endure the cold. They mastered it.